Y a continuación,
And now we have a presentation which is called The Phoenix Journey, a learning process for the co-production of environmental and social inclusion policies. Now, we're going to be hearing about MedTOWN, which forms part of the ENI CBC Med program, which involves 14 different countries in the Mediterranean region, which aim to foster sustainable development and better competitiveness, participation, innovation and inclusion. And to talk about it, we have Georgia Karavangeli, who's the director and coordinator of the MedTOWN project. She's been working in ACPP, the Assembly on Cooperation for Peace, since 2019, and which was when she moved from Greece to Spain. In 2020, she was elected Regional Minister for International Affairs in REAS, the Alternative and Solidarity Economy Network. She's worked as a consultant in networking and the development of the alternative economy. She has, and as in that capacity, she has participated in different cooperation and research projects involved in social economy. But we don't just have her, we also have José Ruiberriz. He has more than 20 years of experience in international cooperation, or sometimes as an expat, for example, as the head of the mission in Palestine and team coordinator in the Middle East. And he has directed cross-border projects with a very high strategic value. He has extensive experience in community organization and processes of public policy co-creation, and he specializes in the field of social economy and innovation in the public sector. So, Georgia and Jose, the floor is all yours.
Buenas tardes a todas y todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having invited us to this really interesting event. This morning's session was very interesting because it gave us the opportunity to get to know other organizations who are working in the same field as ourselves. And that's extremely interesting for us. Now, we form part of the NGO Assembly for Cooperation for Peace. And our aim is to promote democracy and human rights and equality among all human beings, not just in Spain, but also in many other countries besides. So we work at an international level. But here, to share with you a learning journey. A learning journey for the co-production of environmental and social inclusion policies that we embarked on through the MedTOWN project, which is a network of cooperation which is funded through the European funding mechanism, through a program which is based in the Mediterranean basin, the ENI CBC Med program. So our project forms part of an Interreg program which aims to foster interterritorial collaboration between countries in the European Union. And above all, it aims to help promote social rights in Europe. So the idea is to promote access to a decent job, access to decent job opportunities, right to social inclusion, and other rights besides. This program, as you can see, has a budget of 209 million euros. And it's funding 70 cooperation projects between the two parts of the Mediterranean, the south and the north, which means that in this program, the most interesting thing is the fact that countries who are not necessarily members of the European Union, but they are in fact participating in this project, which makes this project quite slightly different and very interesting. Here you can see some of the different areas that are being and activities that are being funded by this program. There are 4 main areas at present. One is focused on entrepreneurship. The second one in innovation and research. Another one focuses on inclusion, social inclusion. This is where our MedTOWN project is located. And then finally, there's another area that focuses on the environment. But there are some projects which are cross-cutting in nature and which in fact are located in more than one of these specific areas or pillars of the program. Our project, MedTOWN, has 9 partners, 9 partner organizations from 6 different countries, Mediterranean countries, of course. And these countries are Portugal, Spain, Tunisia, Jordan, Palestine, and Greece. And we also have the support of 9 public authorities. Some of them are ministries, some of them are municipalities, but in each case, in all cases, they are all public authorities. They're strategic public authorities, which are fully committed to promoting the social economy and social innovation. Here you can see the list of the entities which are beneficiaries in the project. We're the lead beneficiary, and we are coordinating the implementation of the project in all the different countries. So we have signed the agreement with the donor. Here you can see a list of associated partners in Spain and in the other countries as well. Now, the budget is fairly large. So we have 3.4 million euros is the total budget, and almost 3 million euros are provided by the European Union. And the other 3.5%, the remaining 13.5%, of the funding is provided by the different organizations involved in the project. MedTOWN, our project, has 3 main areas of activity. The first one, and the one that perhaps interests us most today, is focused on training, the training of stakeholders working in the social economy, and also public authorities. So training to help them to collaborate and to work together to create initiatives or public policies designed to fight against poverty, to promote social inclusion, and to promote the sustainability of the environment, or to promote environmental sustainability. At the same time, another important element of our project has to do with social experimentation. And it's here that we find most of the challenges, in fact. It's actually the most interesting part as well, because it's accompanied by some research. There's a group of researchers who are working to develop a monitoring and assessment methodology of the different actions that are being carried out. And it's very interesting because through this social experimentation and the monitoring work that is carried out and the assessment work that is carried out, through all this, what we want to achieve, the outcome that we want to attain is to compile recommendations or to identify obstacles that we've come across in these demonstrative actions, so that because this will help us to spark political debate, political discussions, which eventually we hope will end up improving the regulatory framework which exists in the different countries, which will enable more social experimentation and will foster more social experimentation and more co-production, which is what we're trying to promote. So one of our main aims is to design tools for a fair transition in the Mediterranean region, and also to create alliances and partnerships with other organizations and other projects that are working in the same field. There are a number of different groups and people who are going to benefit from the project. We're not just talking about the public authorities or researchers or stakeholders working in the social economy, but also citizens will benefit. Local communities will benefit. Anyone who wants to have a more participatory role in the design of public policies and social policies which affect their lives. Here you can see some of the outcomes of the project, or some of the outcomes that we hope to generate. And I say hope to generate because while we have developed the first focus of our attention, which has to do with training, that's fairly well developed. And in fact, it's number 1 there in blue. It says the training and services plan. We have done that. That's been completed. But in the long term, we hope to achieve all of these other activities. And hopefully, now that the pandemic seems to be retreating, or at least it's sort of more or less under control in certain countries at least, we hope to be able to get on with these activities that we have delayed, that have been postponed during the pandemic, because we want to promote interaction and we kind of need to be there in order to do that. And I think one important outcome is the learning community, the MedTOWN learning community about co-production. We have made headway with this learning community because we've set up a platform in which we want to share all the knowledge and experience that we gain, not just amongst ourselves, but also with other organizations, as well as citizens, general citizens, who would like to visit the platform and to participate. So, what actually is the project? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Well, to explain that, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Jose, who is going to give you some more details about that.
Good afternoon to you all. Thank you very much.
The main goal of the project, our idea as a social organization, was understanding why all the work we had carried out in terms of social intervention in a number of different contexts, we found barriers and obstacles that made it very difficult for us to change the way in which some public policies were implemented. And our conclusion was, in fact, that the different possibilities that a civil society organization has to get involved in public policies and social policies that have an impact on the citizens, direct impact, by the way, is very much dependent on the administration or the protocols in the administration, where the administration centralize this management of social policies and leaves a narrow space and room for citizen participation. And of course, citizen participation could help meet citizens' expectations and get citizens more actively involved. And then another model that is being fostered now is about outsourcing some policies, public policies and services. So we've got these two models that in fact perpetuate a very vertical type of reality where citizens are treated individually and then are turned in a mere customer or client of a service without taking into consideration their skills, experience, etc., which could help them make a contribution and participate, of course, in the design stage of the service itself. So if we look at this reality in the Mediterranean, we have a very isolated cases. There are many similarities in the different Mediterranean countries. We've got weak public administrations that have lost a great deal of their legitimacy and that locally have very limited powers and often very few resources in order to carry out high quality policies. So if we look at the broader context, we wondered, are there other possible models that could be based not on this vertical logic, but rather in a horizontal one that could have a multiplying impact of that would include the knowledge of the citizens in public policy making. So we looked at Northern Europe and Canada in the global north, and we realized that there was this concept of co-production that was being developed, the co-production in social policies. And so the idea there is to come up with a framework where citizens would be able to participate at all stages of public policy development and implementation. So we wanted to find out which were the different possibilities so that, for us to be able to implement such a model in the Mediterranean, this co-production model that would overcome our existing approaches. So there was one thing that was very clear to us due to our experience in our country, but also working with other associations in southern countries. The organized citizens normally lead to very deeply and very deeply transformative processes that have little to do with everything that is public, with public policy development. For instance, this morning we had the chance to participate in a seminar where different local organizations shared their experiences, like, for instance, social gardens or new currencies, local currencies, many different ways of self-organization that provide very innovative solutions that point to changes, deep changes in terms of participation and organization. So we wondered to what extent could this co-production model lead to a new stage, a new phase where the public administration could have the ability to transform itself, and this in order to move from a system that can hardly manage the current existing inequalities, and so come up with deep change generating policies. That's the idea, that guarantees democracy and human rights, and of course environmental rights, let's not forget them. It's been very interesting hearing to David Boyd in his presentation, because whenever we speak about social policies and policies that are developed into local programs, we obviously talk about interventions that are aimed at vulnerable communities or poor neighborhoods. And in these spaces, we have a clear coincidence of realities. I mean, they are outskirts in large cities, whether they are in Tunisia, in Jordan, or in southern Spain. So it's in those contexts where we see the greatest environmental damage. So whenever we think about incorporating a human right and environmental right-based agenda into this co-production model, we focused on processes, on those elements that have to do with improving citizen participation. So everything I just told you about is quite abstract, but let me give you some specifics and specific examples. Our strong point is in our capability to experiment. So in our alliance with 9 organizations and institutions around the Mediterranean Sea, we're going to be launching and developing 6 different projects that will illustrate and represent best practices when it comes to social policy development. I'm not going to give you details about all 6 projects, but I will mention a few of them. For instance, in Palestine, we have 2 partners of the project that are going to tackle a deep improvement of solid waste management, because the system doesn't work. And in Palestine, this is even more so, because there are many limitations and a zoning system that prevent waste management systems from working duly and properly. So the only formula that municipalities find is to burn their waste in landfills near the area where they are generated. And this has a great impact on the lives of the individuals. So we've worked with stakeholders, local stakeholders in social economy, and we've come up with a model to co-manage waste by separating the different types of waste. And we're going to be working with a micro-payment system, micro-payments that will be done to the families and the businesses that actually separate waste. We're going to be working with local administration to process and then to sell transformed waste, which will generate income. So at first we had waste, and now we're going to be having new products that can be marketed. What's the outcome? Well, a policy that generated losses, it now generates profits. And in the past, we had customers that were citizens that were not happy with the waste management system, and they're now very happy, and they can, on top of that, they can participate on the waste management system. Let me mention 2 more projects here. One in Spain, in Seville, in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Europe. I believe there are 2, 3, or even 4 of the poorest neighborhoods in Europe there in Seville, unfortunately. And in this specific neighborhood, we're working in order to establish a local currency that will be accepted only in a very specific territory or area, and that will somehow change the social and economic relations in the territory, and then therefore foster local consumption and strengthening the role of the local businesses in the neighborhood. We're working together with local associations, also the Business People Association and the public administration. The local administration and the municipal social services also participate, and they, in a different study that was carried out in Barcelona, we carried out an audit of public expenditure, and we observed that in 90% of the cases, expenses didn't have an impact at a local level. So that money that came from social subsidies was benefiting individuals or companies, but had no impact at all in the recovery of the local economy. So having a local currency in this case, with a partnership of a number of different stakeholders, of course, enables us to relocate public expenditure and focus it on the local economy. And more importantly, it will be used in a way that one social support, €1 in subsidies will generate 11 to 15 euros in a number of different transactions on the territory. So that is a better formula for social innovation that was possible thanks to a partnership between the public administration and the social economy stakeholders in the territory, together, of course, with the citizens that also participate in the initiative. Another example I would like to go more deeper into, and I've got a short video in Portuguese, I'm afraid. This project is closely related to the topic of the seminar, because it is about creating an edible forest in a vulnerable and poor neighborhood in Lisbon, the capital city of Portugal. Campo Líder is the name of the neighborhood, and there a number of associations in partnership with the city council are working to transform what used to be an abandoned plot of land that is located very close to a very poor neighborhood into something else. And the plot and the maintenance work of the plot was expensive for the city council, and the idea was to transform that land into something different, where people could exchange and spend their time, and also where people could grow a number of different products that could help improve their diet. The idea being for people to participate, to be involved in the project, so that the elderly, for instance, that cannot leave their apartments easily, could participate in the project by transforming the fruit that's been grown into other byproducts. So this is a project that people are very interested in, and they're eager to participate, and this is why this is a very nice and very beautiful success story that reflects how to tackle social and environmental issues successfully with a different management model, of course, that enables us to transform deeply the relationship of the citizens with the nearest environment. I'm showing you some pictures and the video I told you about. Let's see if it works. This is a video about the neighborhood of Campolide in Lisbon, and it is in Portuguese.
Elas foram recolhidas uma a uma, amontoadas, e aí o caminhão foi...
Maioritariamente é reconhecer o terreno, perceber o que é que se faz aqui, para eventualmente depois também termos atividades posteriores aqui e vivermos mais espaços.
da casa, que é aquele tijolo que é só prensado com terra
Las
e
buenas prácticas agropecuarias se refieren al conjunto de principios, normas y recomendaciones técnicas tendientes a reducir los riesgos físicos y biológicos en la producción, procesamiento, almacenamiento y transporte de productos agropecuarios para asegurar la inocuidad del producto, la protección del ambiente y del personal que trabaja en la explotación, buscando un desarrollo sostenible. Esto que estoy explicando es muy para la provincia.
Nada que ver con el del vídeo. Se están mezclando dos audios, ¿verdad? Y puede ser que sea la fuente aquí, ¿verdad? Que haya alguna cosa.
E as outras são garrafas de vinho, garrafas...
Nós vamos juntar-vos por grupos, mas a ideia é vocês trocarem opiniões.
E hoje é pouquinho tempo, mas é só para abrir assim um apetite das coisas que vamos fazendo aqui. E obrigada por terem vindo.
Olha o galito anda aqui, ele acorda a gente logo de manhã.
No início não sabia que isto existia. Depois comecei a ver pessoas a virem cá às quintas, então eu e a mãe viemos cá ver o que era. E daí comecei a cortar, ou a semear, ou a regar. Depois fiz buquetes, estou a gostar muito.
Estes buquês têm sido assim, já assim, um símbolo daqui da agrofloresta, porque a Isaura, grande impulsionadora, e algumas das outras crianças que vêm cá e que fazem os buquês e que vão entregar aos vizinhos, distribuem.
A agrofloresta é um espaço que se pretende que seja para as pessoas. É feito com as pessoas e para que toda a gente possa usufruir dele. Daí organizarmos aqui cursos, organizarmos encontros, as pessoas podem vir aprender, podem vir conviver e acabar por perceber que os espaços verdes podem ter um interesse muito maior do que ser apenas um relevado sem vida. Aqui produzimos comida e produzimos relações entre os vizinhos.
Maioritariamente é reconhecer o terreno, é perceber o que é que se faz aqui, para eventualmente depois também termos atividades com os porteiros aqui e vivermos mais um pouco os espaços que a Junta tem para oferecer.
Temos aprendido não só a parte da plantação, como é que funcionam os ecossistemas entre cada uma das plantas, como é que funciona digamos, uma floresta autossustentável, como é que nós podemos estabelecer algumas pontes entre a agrofloresta e a comunidade à volta, a comunidade escolar. É espetacular, bem, desde o início de todo o projeto.
O que tiramos destes dias é que, de facto, as pessoas estão muito disponíveis para trabalhar em conjunto
estão muito disponíveis para estabelecer pontos. Ficaram muito surpreendidas com esta metodologia de trabalho de abertura e de fazer com, em vez de ser fazer para. E eu acho que nós vamos ganhar alguma capacidade de impacto no território a longo prazo se continuarmos esta boa relação, quer com alguns dos elementos internos da Junta de Freguesia, quer com estas várias pontes, com as ONGs, com a escola, com a comunidade, com o grupo comunitário. Acho que toda a gente está mais consciente do que pode fazer e isso acho que vai impactar a longo prazo.
Bueno, creo que se entendía razonablemente bien, ¿no?
Well, I don't know if you could understand the Portuguese on the video. I hope so. Well, these are the projects developed in this project. There are 6 of them. They're all very innovative. And the special rapporteur told us about hundreds and thousands of very interesting projects that deserve to be looked into and escalated, of course, and implemented in different contexts, because they could lead to changes that finally lead to a transition towards sustainability. But the truth is that we find it very difficult to carry out these small projects where public administration is deeply committed to change. So those limitations are hurdles we need to overcome, and this is what we're doing. We're trying to transform them into something else, and we're trying to open a discussion so that we can do away with them. But these limitations and hurdles are related to a number of different factors and elements that have to do with, for instance, the existing law. It's already been mentioned here that the models we have in our public administration are very complex, and unfortunately there's no partnership included in the existing protocols, and there's also some risks that have to do with the fact that adopting new models and formulas have to face a number of different legal reports or interpretation of the standards that are very strict, and therefore make it very difficult for us to deploy new ways of collaborating. There are other problems that we're facing that are due to the existing need for us to go deeper into this process of collective learning. So the social economy is made up by a number of different stakeholders, organizations, cooperatives, small businesses, associations, and NGOs, whose aim is to build a different type of relationship in our society, other economic relationships that are based on meeting human needs above everything else, above the markets, for instance. This is a framework that was the starting point of our ambitious training project that is available to you if you register as participants in the learning community of the MedTOWN project. Later on I will be showing you the details and where to do that. We held an international seminar to train trainers. That was in October 2020. Unfortunately, had to be held online, but that was the only way for us to invite experts from all 6 countries to participate, and so that all the partners could have their representatives participating in the seminars in order to start new training processes that are aimed at the co-creation of social policies. So in order to design our project, we have used a Phoenician imaginary. As you see, that we have chosen the phoenix, which is a wonderful bird that lives forever, because every time it reaches the end of its life, it burns and it is reborn from its own flames and ashes. So those fire birds are the ones that inspired us in this training process. Our team of trainers have created an international network called Transition Movement. They suggested a 5-step training process. The steps reflect the life cycle of the phoenix, as you see here. For instance, the ashes represent the reflection we carried out about our situation in terms of the limits of the planet, the challenges we face for the sustainability of life on the planet, and the interrelationship between human activity and the natural environment we live in. This process enabled us to introduce concepts that are not deeply rooted in our daily practice. And they're not used as much as they are in the institutional field. The second stage of the seminar concentrated on introducing this concept, co-production. Co-production is one of the possible frameworks in the democratic societies. It's a framework we want to make headway on, versus the classical model we've had so far. But the reality is very different. If you look at Jordan, for instance, they don't have democratic institutions. Or if you look at Tunisia, it's the only democratic republic in the context of the Mediterranean South. So we've worked together to try and understand this concept deeply and how it can be implemented in the different countries. We were surprised to realize that there were many partnerships between public administrations and citizens. Sometimes they're more formal and sometimes maybe more informal. But the fact is that all these processes help us make headway in terms of democratic value implementation. The third element is about rethinking ourselves. We need to look at ourselves as members of the social economy, but we need to look at the social economy as a movement, right? Given the nature of our objectives, we want to have an impact on human relations, and social relations and economic relations from the perspective of sustainability and economic democracy. So we are all part of the same international movement that is social economy. Then the next stage would be spreading our wings, and we're thinking about the best possible strategies to build participatory processes that will be successful and that can generate a critical mass that will help us to prove that what we are defending, which is the introduction of systemic changes in public policies, this needs to be backed by success stories. In that sense, our last session was devoted to looking at a number of different experimental projects that were playing a key role in the different countries. So we identified the best practices and the best strategies here, so that when we were going to be starting our 6 pilot studies, we could have a higher success rate. And so this is the phoenix flying again. This process has been replicated in all 6 countries. the training is replicated in the context of the projects I told you about, like Campo Lide, where we have people actively involved in transformative projects in different neighborhoods, and they are at the same time participating in a training process and a shared reflection process. We've carried out a number of different workshops in Spain, Portugal, Greece, and Jordan. The outcome of the workshops have led us to publishing a guide for social transformation processes and public policy development. This is all available on our website.
And again, here we have the platform for our learning community. So please come and register, participate, and join in this cooperative work that we're carrying out. And make it your own. I think that's all from us. Thank you all very much. I'm sorry, I might have spoken a little bit too long. I hope not. No, yes, you're bang on time. This is at 7 o'clock. This is when we were going to have questions. I'll just stay here just in case if there's no questions, but I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. Now, are there any questions from the floor? I think we need to use the microphone because of the interpreting and because of the streaming. Thank you very much to both of you for your presentation. Now, I don't know, got a couple of doubts that perhaps you could clarify for me. Now, the experiences that you've told us about are they're very different geographically, socially. I'm sure there's lots of different situations and cases involved as well. But in Lisbon and Seville particularly, how was the process of making initial contact? I mean, are you talking about? Did you just come into projects that existed already? Was there some kind of activism already in place? Or was it just a case of identifying needs and coming up with a new project? Can you just tell us the process you followed when setting up the project? And then I understood that it's a kind of a meeting point between public administrations and the people involved in the projects, etc. My question is, have you come across any reluctance against institutionalizing existing movements or existing activities or initiatives? Because I can think of some initiatives here, and there's always this sort of an ambivalent attitude. They want the help of the institutions, but they don't want to become institutionalized. So I don't know if you had any problems in that sense. I know it's a very broad question. I do apologize. Well, to answer the first part of your question, it's a combination of just chance and decisions that we made. Unfortunately, these European projects are often built with the pieces of the puzzle that could be put together in the short term and are based on pre-existing relationships. And it's true that the project was based on the idea of supporting emerging initiatives that we were aware of and that were being led by different organizations. That's the case of Campo Lide, where we knew that Campo Lide had developed its own local currency. And it was to a certain extent linked to the public administrations, but it already existed. In the case of Palestine, there was more of a historic tradition of more classic collaboration. They've been working for many years in issues that have to do with rural development, for example. And this tradition was very strong in the small municipalities where we work. And in the case of Seville, some of the people who were working with our assembly had experience with an initiative linked to a specific neighbourhood, which is in the centre of Seville, not the one we showed, in the old quarter of Seville, and they have a local climate currency there. Now, social currency is a universal concept, of course. But in Seville, there's a social currency that exists in a neighbourhood that has been strongly affected by gentrification. And different groups in the neighbourhood launched this initiative to try to reactivate local life, local commerce, neighbourhood activities. And it was this group that actually wanted to work outside the public administrations, because it was almost like a way of protesting against the fact that the administrations had basically abandoned them. And then when the local council suggested that you know they could do something together, they said no. So, like I said, we're not just talking about setting up a brand new project. No, we're talking about pre-existing situations. We have all sorts of different projects that have to do with local schools, other activities in the neighbourhood. But of course, legitimization is key here, because without legitimization, then there can be, people won't appropriate the project. They won't take it on as their own. It's because he was moving gradually further and further away from the microphone, and it was becoming more and more difficult to hear him. And there are lots of many different groups that work outside the administrations. And there are real cases of real utopias sometimes, where there are people who just produce what they need, they're completely sustainable, and they're often very reluctant to actually start working with the administration. And they're right. I mean, you can totally understand that attitude, because that there are a lot of problems involved in it. So the emphasis of the project was to rethink the way in which the relationship was going to be established. So when we have an innovative project, the pressure that it comes under, this is something that we've been exploring. And the different conditions which are imposed by politics and the time constraints and electoral concerns, etc. So this was a major concern in Campo Líder. There were elections coming up, and of course this does influence. But we didn't realize at the beginning. And we really had to work hard to maintain the enthusiastic support that we had initially from the administration. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? From YouTube, there's a question. It says, do you use the curricular model for the training processes you carry out within the project? Well, I think we base our training processes on the nature of the stakeholders themselves. They're more informal in nature. We've adapted them to the stakeholders. We base our work on the transfer of experiences, sort of mutual learning, real contact, although also virtual sessions as well were held, in which we share experiences, resources, to have this sort of shared process of learning. That's the most important thing. That's what we prioritize. Because the profile of the entities and the organizations, the associations that are involved and that come to attend the training sessions is a very practical profile. They're people who are there, they're practitioners, they're involved in different types of projects. They don't necessarily come from the academic world. And there's something else that's very important, is that we have developed training material, and that each local trainer was then totally free to adapt it to his or her own context. And this was really at the heart of what we call these demonstrative actions that were carried out in the different countries. To participate in the training sessions, participation in the training sessions was completely open. Initially, we launch an open call and we invite everyone. And then we select certain participants because of the COVID pandemic, we couldn't. There was a limit to the number of participants that could actually be there physically. But if you do something online, you can have a lot of participants. That's true, but the problem is that it's a very interactive type of training that we provide. And so we have to, divide them all up into groups and work on it like that. You can't, if you want to do that, you can't have 100 people, for example, in the training session. But for those who aren't chosen, who aren't able to participate, we don't forget about them. Once the training session has been completed, all access is offered to everyone freely. Access to the material that's used is free to everyone. Another question from YouTube. What's the name of the international organization that you linked in to the teacher training or the trainer program? It's called the Red de Transición, the Transition Network. That's the name of the international organization. Does anybody else have any other questions? Now, you talk about freedom of speech in relation to the environment. How do you work on that particular issue? That was something that really struck me. We're talking about how to reach out to citizens, how to really get the message across. How do you work on this whole idea of freedom of speech? Well, in the example of Campo Líder is perhaps the most representative, as well as the case of Palestine. Although all the projects in MedTOWN have a direct or indirect impact on this, the right to political participation is sort of the basic pillar of the entire project. We want to empower people to participate. We want to leave behind the old models of participation and engagement, which are just involved consulting people and that's all. And we want to move much more towards legitimization and increasing legitimization, to move away from, it's not what you know, it's who you know, etc., and to just generate these new spaces in which we're talking about processes of peaceful coexistence, shared reflection, dialogue with the administration. This is what we're doing. This is what they're doing in Campo Libre in order to improve their environment. So they're trying to foster freedom of speech and the right to political participation. Are there any other questions? Last question. So what trends have you identified? You're there, you're out there in the streets, on the ground, working in 6 different countries with 6 different cultures. What trends have you identified? Where are we heading? Are there are citizens more eager to participate? Are we still quite reluctant? Do we not want, or do we not sort of see ourselves as co-creators yet? Well, there are some countries in which I think you can see sort of a greater trend towards volunteering. For example, in Portugal, that field is quite mature. In Spain, we've seen that there's a lot of knowledge. We know a lot about circular models, for example, social currency, and that's really interesting and that's very useful to share with other countries. In Palestine, for example, there's an increased movement of cooperatives. Women are taking on a greater role, and there's quite a groundswell in this sector, although they don't have a regulatory framework for the social economy, which is still lacking. The same situation we find in Jordan, although they're perhaps a little further behind there. There's still a lot of work left to be done. And in Tunisia and Greece, which do have laws on the social economy, they work a lot on issues of inclusion in the labour market through the social economy and social entrepreneurship. And just to add something, it's difficult to extrapolate any conclusions or say something that can be applied to all the different contexts. But I think that if there is a movement in common, it would be sort of the awakening of the younger generations. And also the feminist movement is very important, along with the environmental movement. I think this is sort of the brightest ray of hope in all of this. Obviously, there are different situations, they have different difficulties, but if there's something that all of these cultures have in common is the fact that they're Mediterranean cultures with a very strong patriarchy, which makes it very difficult for young people to actually access these spaces of emancipation and visibility and participation. And it makes it very difficult in some cases. But we have seen examples of people who risk a lot, risk everything really, to express themselves freely, who risk everything to participate and to fight against the patriarchal model. So I think that really is the brightest ray of hope, really, that I would highlight. And of course, we have a lot of young people who are very tech savvy, and they can sort of, move into, they find different spaces to meet each other, to different spaces of action, and they really are at the core of many of the projects that we are supporting. And it's really important for us to identify these groups, to identify them, to go out and find them. This is really interesting to see how we can help them in any way. And just finally, if I can just say a last few words about the connection with the environment. For us, promoting the social economy, this work that we do, is very important because it's an alternative. And it's an essential alternative to what we have now, where we have a high level of development, but we pay very little attention to the environment. The social economy, based on solidarity, is closely linked to more sustainable models, fair trade, which don't only take into account environmental factors, they also take into account social factors. And this combination is very, very important if we want to ensure a fairer transition, which is what they're talking about now in the European Union, right? This fair transition with the new Green Deal, or the Green New Deal. Thank you very much. Well, we'll be here tomorrow in the afternoon to talk about ecofeminism, so I hope you'll be there as well. We can talk about this a bit more. So a warm round of applause, please.